Hello, Riverview botanists. It's Mr. Love. It's April 28th, and I'm sitting by some flowers that are growing in my front yard. This is an awesome time of year to study plants and plant life cycles because a lot of things are flowering right now. And so, for this week's video challenge, I'm going to talk to you about some of the parts of a flower, the role of a flower in helping plants to reproduce, and the role of pollinators as well. We'll take a look around my house and the yard to see some of the flowers that I've been finding. And then at the end of the video, I'll give you some challenges in case you would like to do a science investigation this week related to flowers or plant life cycles. Also, below this video in the description section, there are links to different documents, tools, websites, different things that will help you with your investigation. So please look at the description below the video, and there might be some useful resources for you to use down there. I picked up these flowers, which are lilies, from the grocery store because I noticed that it's really easy to identify and see the different parts of the flower on these. Starting below the flower, it's attached to a stem, and there's some leaves there. And then all flowers have petals. The petals can be different shapes, sizes, and colors, but the role of the petals is to attract pollinators. So if a bee, a butterfly, a fly, a wasp, a bird is flying over the flowers, they might see the beautiful shape of the flower or the bright colors, or they might smell the fragrance from the flower and be attracted to it. And the reason they're attracted is because they would want the nectar for food. So they see the flower or smell the flower, they come in to get food. The nectar can be produced by different parts of the flower depending on what flower it is. They can be produced by the petals or some of these other parts. Once the pollinator, the insect or bird, even lizards can be pollinators, snakes, even monkeys. But once the pollinator is attracted to the flower, it brushes up against these parts here, which are called stamen, and the anther at the end contains pollen. So you can see some of that pollen has fallen off onto the petal. You see those dark spots? Well, when the pollinator comes in to get nectar, it's going to brush against those anthers, get pollen on its body, and then when it moves to another flower to get more nectar, some of that pollen can brush onto the stigma, which is at the top of the pistil, and you can even see it's kind of shiny, looks kind of sticky. So the animal brushes up against that, the pollen sticks to the the stigma, which is this top shiny part, and then that pollen, the flower actually carries that pollen down this tube into the very bottom here, where there are ovules. And each of those ovules, if it joins up with a piece of pollen, can develop into a seed. So eventually, after all those ovules meet up with grains of pollen, this flower will die, and seeds will start to develop where there was a flower. And with fruits, you end up with an apple, an orange, whatever fruit, peach, pear, plum. And usually on those fruits, you can see where the flower would have been. Like on an apple, it's the bottom part. Let's see if I have one here. It's this bottom part of the apple where the flower used to be. It shriveled up and died. And then this apple grew, and inside there are seeds, which were at one point part of were ovules in the center of the flower. We can also look at some of the plants I brought home from the science lab. I had to bring all of those plants home to take care of. This is a spider plant that grows or hangs in front of the windows in the classroom. And if we get close, we can see its flowers. And it'll get a lot more flowers. It just started. You can see there one that hasn't quite opened. Here's one that is open. And then next to the spider plant, we have the purple-leafed shamrock. This is the plant that sits next to the front board by my desk, right behind my desk. And you can check out its flowers. Now these flowers, because these plants are indoors, whatever insects or pollinators would normally pollinate these flowers probably aren't in my house. So these flowers may not get pollinated, but they're beautiful to look at. One of my favorite flowers to eat is broccoli. And if you look really closely at broccoli, each of these little, let's call this the tree top of the broccoli, but each of those little buds will open up into a yellow flower. It gets picked from the field before that happens because it tastes really good when it's in this stage right here. But broccoli is basically a flower that actually, this would have hundreds of little flowers on it that haven't quite blossomed yet. But if you grow broccoli in your garden, or if we grow some at school, we could leave one in the ground and not cut it and watch it blossom into hundreds of little yellow flowers that can then get pollinated to make broccoli seeds. These are buds on a pear tree. You can see the leaves of this one, and then the small buds, you can see the little bit of pink inside, and those should also be opening within the next few days, and each of those flowers will have the potential to get pollinated and then grow into a pear with seeds inside. Even cactus plants like this one that I found produce flowers that need to be pollinated to make seeds. I was hoping that these flowers would open in time for this video. These are flowers on a cherry tree we have in our yard. And actually these are just the baby leaves starting to grow. And then these little buds here will open up probably in the next couple of days as cherry blossoms. And then this tree will fill up with bees and other pollinators. And then each of those flowers will grow into a cherry with a seed in it. And the way cherries are adapted to spread seeds to new places is birds and other animals will come eat the cherries and then poop out the seeds in a new place, and then those seeds can grow in a new area. This apricot tree had flowers on it last week, and you can kind of see the dried up shriveling flowers, and some of those were pollinated. Like right here you can see a baby green apricot starting to grow where the flower was. So that'll grow for the next few months, and probably in July or August this tree will be full of apricots. So there's probably thousands of those little apricots just starting to grow on this apricot tree. Here's a flower that everybody's probably familiar with, the dandelion. And when the dandelion gets pollinated, you can see the pistils and stamen there. Once the dandelion opens up and gets pollinated by insects, then it closes, the seeds start to develop, and then when it opens back up, here's one that's about to reopen. It has this white puffy material attached to each seed. This one's not quite open. I'm actually not seeing one around here that's all the way open, but you've probably seen dandelions that are opened up and it's like a ball of fluff. Each of those little fluffy ends is attached to a seed, and when you blow on them, they drift off in the wind. So that helps the plant to spread its seeds to new locations. They travel on the wind. Every year around this time we put hummingbird feeders up at our house to attract hummingbirds that are migrating through the area. And we have a few different ones. We've noticed that this one, the hummingbirds have a harder time finding. They don't drink as much out of it, and they don't always find this one. And we think it's because the other ones have more bright colors, like the whole thing is bright red and yellow. This one just has these little flowers here. And in this jar we put sugar water, which is basically what nectar is, that hummingbirds, that's their natural diet. And so they're attracted to the fake flowers and they're able to get the sugar water from the middle of those flowers. But we're thinking that maybe the hummingbirds aren't able to find these flowers as easily as our bigger and brighter feeders. My daughter Kalia is doing an experiment to see if making a bigger, bright flower to attach to our hummingbird feeder will help the hummingbirds find it and attract more hummingbirds. And here is the final product. So let's see if the hummingbirds like it. Hopefully the next video will be of hummingbirds feeding off of the feeder. So I'm standing here by this pear tree now that's in full bloom, and I've been watching ants crawl across the flowers and moths and butterflies fly in, other types of flies and bees. There are all kinds of different insects helping to pollinate these flowers so that they can turn into pears, making seeds to help this tree reproduce and grow new pear trees. And I've been thinking about some challenges for you, some ideas for scientific investigations you could do over the next week. One idea is you could find a flower in your home or around your home or when you're out on a walk and draw a sketch of that flower and label the different parts. I included a diagram showing the parts of a flower in the links below the video in the description, so that could be a very useful tool. There's also a link to a 5 senses observation sheet where you could record observations that you make using all 5 of your senses of a flower that you find. You might also choose to study pollinators that are helping to pollinate the flowers, either keeping count of how many pollinators you find, drawing sketches of some of the pollinators, and maybe making a list of questions that you have about the pollinators. You could also be a pollinator. If you'd like to try to spread pollen from one flower to another, you could find the anther, touch it with a paintbrush or a Q-tip or even your finger or a blade of grass, and try to transfer that pollen to another flower, and then watch and see if it develops into a fruit or to seeds. I found some websites online for ways to make a hummingbird feeder if you'd like to try to do an engineering project like that, building a hummingbird feeder and attracting some hummingbirds that you could study. And any other ideas that you have, please send me your ideas, because I'd love to see what you're thinking and what you're wondering about and what you're hoping to learn. See you next week. Thanks.